Free speech payouts costing taxpayers big. Population shifts show states with big gains in working age people. Unemployment analysis and AI safety laws. Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop.
It's the government's fault that they now have to pony up these dollars to pay for violating someone's rights. So I think that's where, everyone's anger should be directed. And if everyone does direct their anger there and, acts as a watchdog on government officials, then this stuff won't happen as much in the future. And we, taxpayers won't be on the hook for these egregious violations of people's constitutional rights.
Now, schools and government entities in Georgia and Tennessee, they're paying large sums of money to settle lawsuits with educators who were fired because of comments they made about Charlie Kirk, the slain Turning Points USA founder. The Center Square associate editor Kim Jarrett reports most of the online posts, which were viewed as celebrating Kirk's death, were on personal social media pages and were reposted online. Now, collectively, the comments not complimentary of Kirk. Kim joins us now to discuss this issue further. Kim, thanks for taking time here with the States. So we've got, of course, educators in this position. They sue after some kind of reprimand against them. And these governmental entities, these taxing bodies, they're paying stuff out here. What is that taxpayer impact?
Well, there's a lot of taxpayer impact. If you look at some of the counties, or one of them is paying $830,000 for a social media post that someone posted and the man went to jail. You look at the University of Tennessee, $1.9 million to a professor who posted something about Charlie Kirk's death. This money has to come from somewhere. If you've covered enough county governments as I have, Greg, you know that from time to time, you're going to hear about lawsuit settlements. Lots of times that comes out of some insurance that the county or city has, but that could lead to higher premiums, which again gets passed on to the taxpayers. So these lawsuits, as we always say, the money has to come from somewhere. Sometimes, very rarely, it might come from the general fund, or a city or county might have to scramble, but the money comes from somewhere.
And a lot of times that is taxpayer funds. Tell us more about the University of Tennessee story that you unpacked in your article, because there are so many instances here, but the Tennessee one is pretty glaring. Tell us about that.
So back in September, right after Mr. Kirk died, one of the professors, she made a post on her own personal page, which got shared. U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn picked this up, and the university's president also picked this up, and they immediately fired this professor. She, of course, sued them. There are a lot of lawsuits, and I cover Georgia and Tennessee, Greg, but there are a lot of lawsuits throughout the country involving situations where people posted something about Charlie Kirk's death. They were fired from their job, and now they're suing. But in the case of this Tennessee professor, she sued, and then just in June, the Board of Trustees voted to pay out $1.9 million, one of the largest that I have seen in my research so far.
$1.9 million that the university is paying out. What was the rationale that they gave for settling?
Well, Board Chairman John Compton said, we could spend this money fighting this. The costs are going to continue to incur, or we can save the money and then we could just use it to, advance the institution. Basically, it was a time and cost-cutting measure to go ahead and settle this case.
Did they recognize any of the free speech questions that were raised in the challenge?
They didn't mention that in their board meeting at all. They just talked about the settlement, but they did basically, that's really all they did. And they had some other business going on at the time. But no, they did talk about the free speech challenges that I recall from watching the board meeting.
This is an issue that you talked with one organization, FIRE, about, and we'll touch on that here in a bit. But again, the Tennessee story is just one. There are other instances here. Tell us about some more.
Well, in Georgia, there is a teacher, or a former teacher now, in tiny little Oglethorpe County, which is right outside of Athens, Georgia. She sued. She's getting $300,000 according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We tried to independently verify that number, and we did not get any response. But I did a little bit of research on Oglethorpe County. That's a very small school system, and that's probably going to have an impact on them. If you also look, there've also been a case with Austin Peay University. There was a professor there. He got a $500,000 payout, and he kept his job as well for some of the things that he said online about Mr. Kirk.
And again, these seem to be like settlements before there's a court actually declaring that somebody was in the wrong or not in the wrong. So it seems that they're kind of, in a way, not taking responsibility for something that the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression had to say. And you talked with Aaron Turr. He is the public policy director. And he said that there's important context here that needs to be highlighted as to who's at fault for these particular cases. Let's watch this.
There may be that short-term cost that may be kind of painful, but the idea is that it's going to deter similar types of constitutional violations by the government in the future. And really, I think, I would say that's where the public should be directing its ire, not at the people who are trying to vindicate their rights, because this is the only way they can do it, right? But at the government for violating their rights.
Again, taxpayers footing the bill for this. But is there really going to be any accountability here, Kim?
That's a good question, because so far what we are seeing in all of these cases at this point that have not been settled, they're just settlements. I did a lot of research on this story just in Georgia and Tennessee, so I'm not a spokesperson for all of the lawsuits in the entire country. I haven't seen like apologies from any of the boards or any talk about, well, yeah, we might not should have fired them or that was a bad decision. Haven't seen any of that yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because somebody made that choice, right? Somebody made that decision to say, well, this person posted on their private social media unsavory things about somebody, whether it's political or not. It wasn't necessarily through an official school channel, but somebody in the school administration made that decision to punish the employee. And you're saying that you haven't seen really anywhere that you've been able to research a public acknowledgement of either doing wrong, possibly violating somebody's free speech, or even somebody being let go for costing the university or the school district hundreds of thousands of dollars?
No, I haven't. In fact, John Compton said he did have confidence in the University of Tennessee's leadership in that, because the University of Tennessee's president was tweeting about this incident where they're paying out the $1.9 billion back when it was happening in September, as was U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn. In fact, in Tennessee, I think that we wouldn't have known about as many posts from people, talking about Mr. Kirkstep if Marsha Blackburn, she's now running for governor, if she hadn't posted them. That's how we discovered them. And that's how some university, in fact, in the Austin Peay case, she actually tagged Austin Peay University and said, what say you about the one where they just paid out $500,000 earlier this year? So, yeah, and there may be some that I have missed because everything that I have is not all inclusive. But no, it's interesting how these cases were settled. They're done. And some of them were settled and you just didn't hear a lot about it until we kind of started going, okay, what's going on with these cases?
People not just losing their jobs and then taxpayers having to cover the costs of these settlements, but there were even arrests. Right? Tell us about one case you're aware of.
Oh, a case out of Perry County, Tennessee. I hope I say his name right, Larry Burshart. He's just a citizen, former law enforcement officer. He posted a meme that had President Trump in it saying something after the Perry County, Iowa shooting that says, we're just going to have to get over it or something similar to that effect. The Perry County, Tennessee Sheriff's Office saw this. It was brought to his attention and they arrested him. He was in jail for a month. He missed the birth of his first grandchild. He missed his anniversary. He had a $2 million bond. And eventually he was released. Fire actually handled his case, and he received $830,000 as a settlement for the time that he spent in jail.
Kim, it's, I think, safe to say these types of payouts that taxpayers are footing the bill on, not quite done yet, are they?
No, there are some all over the country. Here in Tennessee, we have the case of Monica Meek. She's also represented by fire. She is a Tennessee state employee who has been fired. We have a dean at Middle Tennessee University who was fired, and her case is still pending in federal court as well. So yeah, here, especially here, we're in the states that I cover. I did come across a couple. I know there are a few more going on in other states as well.
Well, let's wrap up with something that Tur told you for this story in particular about, this really isn't about the quality of somebody's speech. It's about free speech. Let's hear that.
Our goal is just to protect and defend their right to say it, whether we agree with it or not. Because the First Amendment is supposed to be there for everybody. It's supposed to be a principle that protects every American's right to speak their mind and to express their views, because that's a principle that's fundamental to our democracy and fundamental to being human and being able to, express yourself.
Kim, thanks for taking time with us. We'll definitely check back in on these stories and plenty more out of Georgia and Tennessee. We'll be right back with more from the states. Some states gaining big in the number of prime working age people moving in. That means big losses for states where such workers are moving out, and the trends can be somewhat stark. Welcome back to the states. I'm Greg Bishop. Texas, Florida, and North Carolina continuing to lead the nation in the number of people moving to their states, but not just for all ages. In particular, the number of prime working age people ages to 18 to 54. California, New York, and Pennsylvania, on the other end, are losers for that age group. Now, every 10 years, the U.S. Census provides official counts of the United States population. Those numbers are used to draw lines for congressional apportionments, just how many seats in Congress a state may have, and state-level data is used to draw legislative boundaries and even determine which districts should receive more taxpayer funds. Now, to show how this impacts states' power in Congress, the Center Square contributor Chris Wade reported earlier this year, after U.S. Census numbers were released on an annual basis, that New York stands to lose 2 seats in Congress after the 2030 census, with the blue state's population growth lagging far behind the rest of the country. So consider that. New York's control in Congress would slip by 2 seats in Congress if their population trends continue on a downward trajectory. The reports by the nonpartisan redistricting network suggests New York could lose nearly 10% of its congressional representation after the next count in 2030. And that could cost the Empire State 2 seats. But New York not alone. Democratic-led states could also take a hit, like California. They could see a 10% reduction possibly. And that means up to 4 seats they could lose because of continued population trends. Rhode Island could lose 1 seat, while Illinois could possibly lose 2 seats. And again, that's because of the population trends in the decennial census. Meanwhile, states that are growing, Texas, Florida, they're both expected to gain another 4 seats in Congress, giving Texas and Florida that much more control over the U.S. Congress after that next census. And the group, analyzing the projected increases, they could see 10% to 14% respectively increased in the number of seats in Congress. Now, the data from the census every 10 years used for reapportionment of Congress, but also the census updates annual estimates. So every year they put out these numbers, and the annual estimates, not just for the total number of people that count, they also break down the various demographics. Now, the census's most recent release of state populations by characteristics covers 2020 to 2025. These are annual estimates, and in particular, a breakout of the ages of those being counted is what's most recently released. So let's take a look at some of the big gains, and in particular, those aged 18 to 54, what some consider prime worker age. States with big gains since 2020, so for 5 years up to 2025, the most recent release from the census, Texas gained 1.5 million people. And that's every year added up in the gains they made of those 18 to 54. Florida gaining almost 1 million. North Carolina gaining 360,000. Arizona, Georgia, and Tennessee all gaining 6 figures in the ages of those 18 to 54. The most recent census data also shows states with losses of that age group over the past 5 years. New York lost 228 people between 18 and 54 in the past 5 years. California lost 191,000. Illinois lost 35,000. And Louisiana lost about 33,500. And again, that's over the 5 years, each annual estimate added together. But with this type of data, there's plenty of ways to slice and dice those numbers. If you're proficient with spreadsheets and raw data, it can pretty quickly show you some big differences. Let's take a look at a more narrow section of the data from across the country. So when looking at just annual changes from 2024 to 2025, and also narrowing that working age number from 18 to 54 to be 18 to 35, so we're looking at even the younger subset of that prime age working population, 18 to 35, and the trends don't necessarily change, but the annual rate, it can be somewhat eye-opening. So here are the states with big gains of 18 to 35-year-olds over just 1 year change, 2024 to 2025. In 1 year, Texas gained 109,345 individuals age 18 to 35. Florida gained 33,600. North Carolina surpassing Florida's gain at 38,000 of those 18 to 35-year-olds. Arizona, Georgia, and Tennessee also seeing big gains. But what about the other side of that spectrum? The losses. Well, they're in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, for these states. So from 2024 to 2025, California lost 37,700 individuals between the ages of 18 to 35. They're moving elsewhere. New York lost 17,600. And Pennsylvania lost over 9,000 individuals who are aged 18 to 35. So what's behind some of this? Well, major growing areas. In Texas, which was a big winner over the past 5 years and over the past year, 8 of the 15 fastest growing cities in the U.S. are in Texas. And that's according to U.S. Census data released back in May. The 5 fastest growing cities in the country with populations of 20,000 or more were Salina, Texas, Fulshear, Texas, Princeton, Melissa, and Anna, Texas. 15 fastest growing cities and towns in the country with populations of 20,000 or more, hitting all of these various areas, including areas in Utah, and Colorado, and Idaho, and Arizona, Alabama, and again, in Texas. Now, by contrast, large cities saw population declines over the same time period, especially in the Northeast, led by New York City. And in New York, Republicans long argued that the state's outmigration being driven largely by the state's highest in the nation tax burden, a business sector struggling under excessive regulations and rising labor costs. California also seeing population trends not too favorable. Residents left more affordable places in the country, leaving California to find greener pastures over the past 20 years. But a demographer said, research the issue, it's been more about the Golden State and what they're experiencing in that negative population growth. Eric McGee, he's policy director and senior fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California, telling the Center Square earlier this year that the state had some negative population growth over the years and then really seemed to pick up around COVID, which was a new concept at the time. And he said that the growth in the population slowed a bit and has also made the state lag other states who are growing, like Texas and Florida. Now, interestingly, in some of these blue states like California, McGee said many residents left the state for other states, but has been mostly backfilled by individuals moving into California from outside of the country. That's also the case in Illinois, which experienced a decade of decline. Until last year, they released new numbers showing Illinois had more individuals moving from outside of the country into the state of Illinois than the number of Illinoisans moving out of Illinois to other states. Now, it's not just census data that can be very enlightening looking at these trends. It's also other data from moving companies that help solidify some of these trends. And when it comes to the impact on taxpayers, expect soon to see headlines about the Internal Revenue Service's tax migration reports, which are released every year to show how much states are gaining or losing in total income tax revenue because of such migration to other states. Now, the IRS has yet to update their latest numbers for the 2024 to 2025 year. The team from the Center Square will be looking out for that update. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Last week's jobs report released. It's giving some food for thought on the strength of the U.S. economy. Now, the report was mixed, but still narrow. Professional and business services added 36,000 jobs, building on the 172,000 it had added since a recent low in October. A genuine, if not brand new, bright spot. Now, social assistance added 25,000. Healthcare added another 22,000, but leisure and hospitality jobs lost 61,000 positions. It's the sharpest one-month drop since the pandemic, based on weak seasonal hiring. Now, the unemployment rate ticked down to 4.2% from 4.3%, but the reason should temper some enthusiasm. To discuss more about why a falling unemployment rate isn't necessarily good news is Everyday Economics hosts, the Center Square publisher Chris Krug, and PhD economist Orphe Difungi.
Unemployment fell to 4.2% in June, but not because people found work necessarily. Payrolls added just 57,000 Americans to the labor rolls. Dr. Rowe on a soft jobs picture and the Fed's new way of talking. What are your thoughts? I mean, that 57,000 ad should read like good news, but is it?
Yeah, it just confirms the softness we've been talking about, right? Basically, no job growth in 2025. We had a little bit of a pickup in Q1, but when you look at the last 3 months, the labor market's average about 111,000 jobs or so per month added. That's below, what we had gotten used to. That's below normal. Before the pandemic, we're adding, close to 200,000 jobs a month, right? So the unemployment rate falling slightly to 4.2 from 4.3% just tells you that basically the pace of employment growth that is needed to keep the unemployment rate stable is very low. And basically, it doesn't take a lot for the unemployment rate to go down. Well, why is that? Well, because our labor force has shrunk so much. We have more and more people leaving the labor force or out of the labor force. Why is the labor force participation rate so low? Well, potentially because, first, we're losing people. Second, because it's very hard to find a job these days. Hiring rates are really low. And you can see it in the quit rates as well. People are not quitting their jobs. Well, why would you not quit your job to get a better paying one? Well, because there's just not a lot of opportunities out there. That's the state of the labor market. Yeah. Is it deteriorating? No. This jobs report tells us that basically the labor market is treading water. It's kind of just hanging in there. It's stable. It's not deteriorating, but it's not great either, right? It's kind of stagnant to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, the consensus was 115,000. That's what the anticipated number was for jobs added in June. And, they literally came in at half. But there's some interesting sort of like underpinnings that I wanted to talk about, within those numbers, right? The hiring that did occur was almost all healthcare, government, social assistance. And those are, pieces of the economy that don't necessarily respond to interest rates. There's not a whole lot of relationship there. What does that say about the private economy?
If you look back at the last couple of years, basically all of the job growth was concentrated in healthcare, social assistance. Some government, not a whole lot, because basically federal government state tumbling. So almost no job growth in the private sector, almost in fact negative in the last couple of years, right? Private sector job growth. That's the economy we're in right now. So it's very, to me, it's kind of shocking to me, baffling to me, that a lot of people talk about a labor market reacceleration, that they talk about a strong labor market, when really, if you're not in healthcare, you can't find a job in this economy, period, right? And I think that's problematic. Also, the fact that basically you're talking about an expansion where basically, construction, manufacturing, trade, transportation is close to flat. It's not negative, right? There's not a lot of cyclical momentum left in this labor market. That's what this means, right? And then you also, when you look at the latest job numbers, we also had a revision in the previous month's jobs report, a downward revision in the previous month's jobs report. At the same time, leisure and hospitality, which looked like it was going to be picking up a little bit, at least temporarily, because of the World Cup and all these other events, summer events. Well, that sector actually shed jobs last month. So I don't see I don't see many reasons to be enthusiastic about the labor market. I mean, maybe on the optimistic side, look, things are not getting worse. They're kind of just hanging in there after a major downshift, is really my read of this labor market.
Yeah. So the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, he cut the Fed's statement in half, and he stopped previewing, the next move. He's explaining how he decides instead of what he'll do. And in plain English, for the benefit of our understanding, as sort of we, move into this new space with the new Fed chair, what's changed, and is there any reason for people to care one way or the other about how he's delivering this information?
Yeah, I mean, they for most people don't pay attention, so they don't really care. But ultimately, the information is what he wants to do is he wants to kind of reform the Fed a little bit. For a long time, the Fed's been kind of telling you what it plans to do, right? Example, we expect to hold interest rates until more data, or we expect get more data, and when we get more data, we'll resume our easing or whatever. But the new Fed chair wants to give us clarity about framework guidance. And what he means by framework guidance is how they make the decision, and I think that's good, because it gets rid of the confusion that people are having about how the Fed makes the Fed goes about setting interest rates, what goes into the individual forecast. No one really knows. And, and so having clarity on what to look for in the economy that will potentially indicate a rate hike or rate cut, I think is important, right? And so that's good. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. Now, of course, there's some cost involved with that, and you can see it right away. It's in the volatility, right? The fact that there's less communication about where the rates are going. That causes a lot of volatility in the short run. People are confused; they're not sure. They're worried, right? The fact that the Fed chair had such a short, briefing last time around, and that he didn't seem willing to answer certain questions, causes a bit of a short-term volatility. But ultimately, I think we're going to be better off. He's going to have these task forces that are going to be formed to kind of look at how the Fed does things, and ultimately, the goal is to put us in a better place. And so I'm confident that things could improve, and the Fed could potentially do a better job than it's done in a long time. And that's not to say that Fed Chair Powell didn't do a great job. I think he guided us through a tumultuous time with COVID and all the shocks, and then the tariffs. And, there was so much going on in the economy. But I think it's, having listened to Governor Warsh, the Fed Chair Warsh at the last conference at Sintra, I'm pretty confident that he's really trying to steer the Fed, to steer the U.S. economy in the right direction. He takes the job seriously.
Yeah, well, his first minutes will come out on Wednesday, so we'll have a better idea of kind of what's on his mind, and we'll get maybe a
on the committee. On the committee, it's nice. It's important to figure out, like, how do they think about these things? How do they frame things, right? So that the rest of us, private sector observers, can actually, go ahead and forecast these changes based on the incoming data that we all have access to.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Dr. O. Always appreciate your thoughts. Make sure you catch Orphe's Everyday Economics column Mondays in the Center Square. Hear us every weekend on the Center Square Radio Hour. And you can find Everyday Economics Inside the States, the Center Square's daily news magazine, on YouTube and everywhere you stream.
That was Governor J.B. Pritzker Monday, signing what he says is the first in the nation law regulating AI over safety concerns. Could similar regulations be coming to a state near you? Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Now, last month, federal regulators ordered an overhaul of the nation's grid connection rules in an effort to fast-track power for artificial intelligence data centers and manufacturing plants, all as part of an effort to protect national security and economic interests. Now, the Center Square's Alton Wallace reports the directive included strict safeguards to shield U.S. ratepayers from rising electric costs. But there are concerns over artificial intelligence in Congress last month, the future of K-12 education as it relates to AI, and what could be done to preserve education at both the state and federal level. It's an ever-changing world. That was a discussion at the U.S. Subcommittee on Education and the American Family hearing earlier. Now, the Center Square reporter Christine Johnson reports Subcommittee Chairman Tommy Tuberville said that he and Ranking Member Lisa Blunt, they have taken steps to ensure protection of education with the innovation of AI through a letter they sent to the Government Accountability Office, asking them to begin an investigation on the effects that AI has on K-12 education. Now, legislators across the country, they also have been grappling with how to regulate artificial intelligence. The rise of increasingly intelligent and emotionally responsive AI companions, Pennsylvania members of the legislature advanced legislation to protect vulnerable children and adults from dangerous AI chat interactions. The Center Square reporter Julia Kramer, she reports that the proposed ban on nudification apps continues to garner bipartisan support as leaders across the state realize the immense danger that there could be that AI poses to children and adults. Now, aiming to prevent unhealthy attachments from developing in the first place, the bill would hold AI applications accountable to put safety guidelines and protocols in place. Again, Pennsylvania considering that legislation. They're also looking at regulating the increased presence of digital labels in major retailers and have the potential to allow AI-driven price algorithms to capitalize on shoppers' habits in ways most shoppers wouldn't even realize. On the jobs front, the Center Square's Voters' Voice poll recently found sentiments about AI and whether there are concerns that the technology will take jobs. And you can see the concerns of those who were polled, with 36% being very concerned and 34% being somewhat concerned. And that gives you a pretty large portion who are concerned about the possibility AI is going to impact employment. But there are other concerns that voters have around AI. 77% of those polled for the most recent Voters' Voice poll said that AI should be treated as a tool controlled by humans. Only 11% said AI systems should eventually be eligible for legal rights or personhood. In a separate question, 45% said there's too little government regulation on AI. Less than 1 in 4 said there's just the right amount of regulation. 13% said there's too much regulation. Now, in Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker said yesterday that since the federal government hasn't taken any steps, the legislature and the governor did take those steps.
The potential for harmful model behavior and unintended algorithm jailbreaks. Those are serious threats to the public interest and to the future of the industry. So where the federal government has been unwilling to step up, states must venture once more unto the breach. We must protect our people from the dangers of AI while still harnessing the unique potential of the technology. And we're doing it in Illinois with a bipartisan, first and most protective in the nation law.
Now, Illinois, as well as other states, have already approved legislation impacting how AI is used in the workplace for things like hiring practices or other employment functions. But Pritzker spells out what makes Illinois' new law he signed Monday different from previous legislation regulating the use of artificial intelligence.
We are requiring large AI companies to develop risk mitigation frameworks and undergo mandatory annual independent third-party audits, a first for any state AI legislation. Developers must report critical safety incidents within 72 hours or within 24 hours if the incident poses an imminent risk of death or serious physical harm. We're requiring the largest AI companies to publicly explain the risks that their systems could pose, as well as the measures that they're taking to mitigate those risks. The law provides clear protections for whistleblowers and creates confidential channels for employees to report safety risks.
Now, while Pritzker said Illinois' law is leading the nation, there are few differences between Illinois' law and those of New York and California. Jeremy Kudnon, director of American Innovations Network, reiterated his long-running concern over the differences, which he said could have major impacts. He told the Center Square it's the third-party audit requirement that sets it apart, and everything else is defensible but very close to SB 53 in California was. Kudon said that was the standard that they thought going into the process Illinois would adopt and would follow and create a national standard, a standard that was growing in acceptance. So you can definitely expect discussions about the impact of regulating on AI and how Illinois' law could ripple across the country to continue. Keep an eye on that. And we'll be right back with more from the States. Welcome back to the States. It's now time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Medicaid slated for $1 billion. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program getting $5.3 million. and a new children's hospital in the Triangle for $208.5 million. That's all in North Carolina's $34.4 billion state budget. Now, more than $9.3 billion is divvied into various areas of the State Department of Health and Human Services. The spending plan approved by lawmakers late last week is awaiting action by first-term Democratic Governor Josh Stein. Now, the Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reports if Stein signs the state budget into law, it'll be the first budget signed by a North Carolina governor since November 18th, 2021, and the second since September 18th, 2025. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, in accordance with federal legislation from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, will implement changes. The law addressed rules on able-bodied adults without dependents, work requirements for ages 55 to 64, dependent exemptions, changed vulnerable group exemptions, and tightened some local waivers. North Carolina's share of federal SNAP benefits program is about $2.8 billion. Meanwhile, you've got payment errors for Arizona's food stamps. Could soon cost the state's taxpayers $200 million. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Arizona's SNAP payment error rate for fiscal year 25 was 10.8%, which ranked 33rd in the country. Arizona's SNAP payment error rate increased from 8.84% in 2024, according to USDA data. Now, the state's high payment error rate, which includes overpayments and underpayments, could cost the state nearly $200 million if it does not bring that error rate below 6% by 2028, according to Common Sense Institute Arizona, a nonprofit research organization. And charges made in federal law by H.R. 1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, were designed to reduce the cost of the federal program, such as SNAP. Many states across the country not yet under that 6% threshold. In New York, Governor Kathy Hochul touting $100 million in public safety funding Monday during a visit to Nassau County, a GOP stronghold where a recent poll showed the Democrats narrowing a gap with Republican challenger and County Board Executive Bruce Blakeman. Now, Center Square contributor Chris Wade reports Hochul announced the state is making at least $75 million in grants available from New York police departments and sheriff's offices across the state to improve technology and modernize equipment through the state's law enforcement tech grant program. That receives a fresh infusion of funds in the recent fiscal year 2027 state budget. Another $25 million will fund a new statewide records management system, placing a decades-old platform, replacing that for improved information sharing and streamlined reporting. At least 500 police agencies outside of New York City, including village, town, city, and tribal police departments and county sheriff's offices, are eligible for the LE Tech grants for upgrades. Those upgrades can pay for drones, 3D crime scene laser scanners, trauma kits, automated external defibrillators, body-worn cameras, and more. In California, state appeals panel agreeing Los Angeles was not required to seek voters' permission before allowing a utility to impose surcharges on city residents. Legal Newsline's Scott Holland reports the complainant stems from a 2022 franchise agreement between the city of South California Gas, a 21-year deal that requires the utility to pay a franchise fee equivalent to 5.5% of gross receipts from national gas sales. Now, the complainant alleged the company passed 3.5% on to customers. Seeking to represent a class, the complainant alleged that the surcharge is actually a tax and therefore imposed illegally because of a California constitutional clause approved back in 2010 requiring voters to approve such taxes. But a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge granted summary judgment to the city, finding the franchise fee and surcharge are exempt from that clause. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here Wednesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the states, powered by the Center Square.